Hello? All right. It's 10 p.m. and today's stream is going to be a little different. I'm not exactly sure why I'm nervous about tonight's stream. Um, I guess maybe it's because I never thought that perhaps this platform would get so intimate, so deep with what we're going to be talking about here today. I just never thought that maybe that I'd be talking about this. But I definitely have thought before that I should be talking about this. And I guess more than anything, that's where I want to start out. If you give me a couple of minutes, I'll go ahead and do so. I want to say welcome everybody. Welcome to I Make Plays TV. And today there will be no plays made, good or bad. Uh, there's just going to be real talk, real discussion. Um, Trying to outlet some of these thoughts that I've been having for months and weeks. And honestly, I guess perhaps some of them I've had for years. Because I mean, I don't want to turn this into a super political discussion. It's going to, but we've been 4 years at this point under, I'd say this administration. Sometimes it feels like a regime. Um, but we'll say administration because as it stands, we do still live in America, and I'd like to think that America is above that, or I always would have liked to think that America is above that. Um, what I want to do first is thank everybody that's out there fighting currently on the streets, whether that be Rochester, Portland, Detroit, uh, Kenosha, Minnesota, anywhere you're at fighting for this cause, causes of human rights, uh, causes of just insisting that people be acknowledged as people. Thank you to everyone that's out there. What I want to do is apologize to, I guess I want to apologize to some people, but mainly I want to apologize to myself for not saying anything earlier and just sitting back and watching. I've had a lot of thoughts that I wanted to share. I just I was nervous about sharing them for some reason, and you know what? I think that being with the events that has happened in this past few weeks, and especially with the events of Daniel Prude's murder this week in Rochester, um, I think now would be the proper time to go ahead and do so. Anybody is free to go into the chat and voice their opinions. Um, I just ask that if you are going to do so, address me. Do not address anybody else in the comments. If this is the case, I will be repeating this for you know for a while. Anybody that comes in, address me. Do not address anybody else in the comments, so that I can have this discussion. I don't want to have negativity and arguments in regards to the chat, and I'm willing to listen to differing opinions and everything like that. But I don't want my chat to turn into a negative place, because that is not what this platform is. This is not what I've created. Now, I would have done this on Facebook Live. The reason that I didn't is because Facebook Live is not necessarily a super public forum per se. Um, I feel like if I do this on something like Facebook Live, I'm going ahead and I'm speaking into an echo chamber of people that only agree with me and want to listen to me, and I still could be falling into that trap. But being that I've opened this up on Twitch and then just chatting, anybody that comes by, it scrolls by, they could perhaps click on this, see what it is, and we can maybe have this discussion. Um, so I guess I wanna begin the discussion officially with last week's March on Washington. Um, it was the anniversary of the March on Washington, the most famous one with John Lewis and Martin Luther King, where they spoke. John Lewis was 23 years old at that event in the 60s. I am 26 years old now, and I see a powerful, educated speaker, a powerful, educated black man uh, going up there from a young age and trying to affect things with his words. Um, I, it's inspiring, but I know that words are not always enough, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Last week was also Jackie Robinson Day. Uh, the I think it was last Friday. Yes, the March on Washington, Jackie Robinson Day, anniversary of Emmett Till's murder. So, as it stands, it was an important day for Afro American culture. Um, a lot of people descended upon Washington D.C. to let their voices be heard, and among those voices was Yolanda King. Yolanda King is Reverend Martin Luther Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter. Martin Luther King Jr. the third's daughter. Yolanda King is 14 years old. At 14 years old, Yolanda King took it upon herself to write a speech and get up in front of thousands, tens of thousands, and declare that Black lives matter and always have. And I think to myself, if 14-year-old Yolanda King can go onto that platform and say those words and have such a rousing, moving speech, what is necessarily stopping me from getting on my platform here, such as Twitch, and talking to directly to my people? You know, Yolanda King started young. I talked about John Lewis just a second ago. He was at the March on Washington originally at 23 years old. And again, I am 26, thinking to myself that I'm afraid to go onto my platform and speak politically because I don't know what people would necessarily think, and with what I'm trying to do moving forward, because I am trying to build something in Twitch, if it would be conducive to building my community, if it would be conducive to keeping things positive, and not allowing that negativity to seep in, because this situation is a powder keg of negativity just waiting to blow, and in a lot of ways it already has. um I know that in Minnesota a couple of months ago, George Floyd was kneeled his neck was kneeled on until he couldn't breathe. He called for his mother. He told the police that they were killing him. They didn't care. They continued to do so, do what they were doing. There was a bunch of them. Everybody watched. Nobody stopped them. And we saw the results of that. Um, Here in Rochester, we felt the results of that, and I'm sure countrywide the results were felt. I mean, in the same way that there are protests all over the country right now, there were even more so back when this George Floyd situation happened. Everybody was mobilized. Things were definitely on edge. I remember that night of it was a Saturday night, just like this one, when Rochester had enough, and and riots broke out and started, and people started looting and breaking into businesses and things like that, and it it felt like the purge. It was lawlessness, but when I look at that and I see that lawlessness, it was lawlessness in response to lawlessness. And it wasn't only our country. I mean, the George Floyd situation sparked worldwide protests. Germany, Japan, Australia, um, England, everywhere where there were black people, Syria, people everywhere there were people of color who have felt oppression and have felt as though they were not as important. Everybody felt the pain of watching that video. So we talked about George Floyd, and we should continue talking about George Floyd. We talked about Breonna Taylor, and we can continue to talk about Breonna Taylor. She has received magazine covers and billboards before she has received justice. And I am not mad in regards to the exposure of the situation. People need to know, people need to be confronted with it in uncomfortable situations. Though it is noted how much quicker all of these things move than our justice system. As a matter of fact, when it comes to Breonna Taylor, I don't know that our justice system is going to move ever. No matter who insists that it does, who asks that it does. The richest of us, Oprah Winfrey, has insisted that this be something that be opened up and looked at and talked about. And the powers that be in Louisville, Kentucky, uh, they decided that that's not the case. Um, Last week, before the March on Washington, we had another incident. Jacob Blake. From what I understand, he was breaking up a fight, went to go into his car, shot 7 times in his back. We all thought he was dead for some time on Twitter. Twitter keeps you up to date with things in the moment, but when things move so fast that you can't always know exactly what's happening when. There was a good 24-hour period where people thought Jacob Blake was dead. Coming to find out that he's paralyzed in a hospital somewhere, handcuffed to his bed. Paralyzed and handcuffed to his bed. Where's he going? Are we so afraid of this man having any sort of freedom that we're going to handcuff a paralyzed man to a bed? We're going to restrain a paralyzed man? And those are just some of the names that we talked about, and there were many responses to those names, and we'll talk about those in a bit. But what I always look up and I see a lot of people. I guess what I look up at is what I don't see, and it's one of the things that bothers me the most. I'm sorry about this. One of the things that I don't see, and I guess that's the thing that bothers me the most. I don't see the name of Sean Reed. Sean Reed was murdered by the police on Facebook Live. That's right. His video was it was caught on camera. He was shot in the back while he was fleeing from the police. And when they shot him, he had his Facebook on live, as I said. His phone fell to the ground, camera up, and we see the cops approach him. They approach, and one of the police officers, he chuckles, and then this is inhuman. He chuckles, and he notes, haha, that's gonna be a closed casket, homie. I want to be clear that this is not only an issue with white people or white cops at all. Because the police officer that said those words was a black man. I needed to be known that all skin folk ain't kinfolk. Because they are black, that does not mean that they can necessarily be trusted to protect and serve the community in the way that they should. Many of these police officers, and I'm not going to say all of these police officers, they identify as police officers before they identify as Black Americans. And I believe that that in itself is an issue. There were other cops and detectives coming to the scene attempting to cover their faces because they knew that there was a camera there. And that was eventually before they just decided to, I'm sorry, that was before they just decided to eventually reach on the evidence and just turn the camera off. The damning evidence was already there though. Look it up, Sean Reed, SeanReed. Sean Reed. And look at the video. Don't don't look at what these people say about him. Look at what was done to him. And look what was said about him after it was done. And asked if that was handled in the way that it should have been. And that's something that we don't talk about. Another name, Elijah McClain. This, I broke down. I broke down when I heard the story of Elijah McClain. And I heard it late because this happened last year. I'd have to look up the exact area, and I can look up the exact area, but Elijah McClain was a man. Um, he suffered from autism. Um, and among other things, he had a weak immune system, but he was a wonderful soul, a beautiful child. He was a musician. He practiced his craft at violin at local animal shelters, playing for cats. I know it, it sounds like a virtue signaling story when I say that he played violin at the animal shelter for cats that did not have owners. That is the type of person that he was. Every time I talk about him, he went to the store in his own neighborhood one night. This was last year before COVID-19, but his immune system was already compromised. He frequently had to wear a mask to make sure that he was healthy. If there's anything that we in this world and in this country can understand right now, it's having to wear a mask to maintain your health. As he's going to the store, somebody that doesn't know him sees him and makes an assumption and makes a judgment. And they call the police. Mind you, at this point, he's already been into the store and is on his way walking back when the police stop him. He is near his home to the point where he can tell the officers that I live right over there. These officers didn't care. They restrained Elijah. And if you see a picture of Elijah McClain, there is no reason, absolutely no reason, if you see a picture of Elijah McClain, that he had to be restrained in the manner that he was restrained. Thank you. Appreciate it. And and I'm sorry about that. And with that being said, when they're all over him, this multitude of cops, multiple cops all over him, holding him down, on top of him, on his chest and everything like that, he is begging them to let him go. He is telling them that he will do whatever he wants him to do. He will comply with whatever they want. He will be whatever they want him to be. These are things that he said to them. He told those cops as they pushed their weight down on him and violated his human rights. He told those cops that I love you. He said, "I love you" to these cops. And do you know what these cops responded with? They injected him with horse tranquilizer. A 23-year-old kid with autism, a massage therapist. They injected him with ketamine, enough to kill him. No threat to anybody. I have his last words pulled up, and I'm sorry if I'm tearing up while I'm reading these, but this is this is some of the most harrowing, frustrating things that I've ever heard. He starts as they're leaning on him, as he's being restrained by police officers. He starts with the common refrain, too common. I can't breathe. Those are the words he starts with. He goes on to say these words. I have my ID right here. This is all on video, mind you. I have my ID right here. My name is Elijah McClain. That's my house. I was just going home. I'm an introvert. I'm just different, that's all. I'm so sorry. I have no gun. I don't do that stuff. I don't do any fighting. Why are you attacking me? I don't even kill flies. I don't eat meat. I don't judge people, though. I don't judge people who eat meat. Forgive me. All I was trying to do was become better, and I will do it. I will do anything. I will sacrifice my identity. I'll do it. You all are phenomenal. He's talking to the cops, mind you, here. He says, you all are phenomenal. You are beautiful, and I love you. Try to forgive me. He did nothing wrong, and he asked these cops to try to forgive him. Goes on to say, I'm a mood Gemini. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. As he's struggling, they're telling him to stop struggling. And he goes, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to do that. I just can't breathe correctly. And their response was to inject him with ketamine. Enough ketamine to kill this gentle soul. And that went a year. That went a year without publicity. That went a year without the general public hearing about it, without the video coming out. That happened August 30th, 2019, almost exactly a year ago. That was last week, that was a year ago. And we just recently heard about this. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. And I know the reason why we don't hear about this. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Because I know the reason that we don't hear about this. But if anybody is ever concerned, please look up this case because this is one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever had to realize that has happened in our country. If you see a picture of Elijah, you will realize that he was no threat to anybody. No threat to anybody. And he was restrained, not listened to, and injected with ketamine. Not far from his home. And that brings me to my home, Rochester, New York. Rochester, New York is the Flower City, known for Wegmans and garbage plates. But that's not why we're in the news this week. Daniel Prude. Daniel Prude. Another black man murdered by the police. And this one is close to home. And that's not just because it's in Rochester. When I say that this one is close to home, I mean I was raised on Cottage Street. I was raised right there next to Jefferson Avenue. I walked those streets as a child. My friends lived over there. My girlfriend, who at some point I want to make my wife, lived over there at one point. And Daniel Prude, a man who lived in Chicago who came here to visit his brother. I can't say why he was here to visit his brother, but from what I understand, he came here to visit his brother. He was having a mental health episode. He was. He was not in his right state of mind. However, there is a video circulating where you will note that though he was not in his right state of mind, he was complying with the police. The man is naked, butt ass naked. It is March at this time in Rochester, New York. If you're familiar with upstate New York, you know that March is still winter. It is snowing. A bunch of police are around him, all in sweaters and caps. Cozy. They're cozy. And he is outside having a mental health episode. His own brother, his own brother calls the police because he is worried about what his brother is going through. When they tell this man to get down on the ground, he says yes. When they put the zip ties around his hands, he allows them to go ahead and do so. Yet, after that, they don't say to him, "Sir, it's snowing out in the middle of winter. Would you they don't put him in the squad car. They don't give him a blanket. They show this man absolutely no empathy, no remorse. They go to their vehicle and instead of getting something to and secure this man and have him be warmed and get him the help that he needs, they get a spit bag. Now look, the police unions around the country and things like that will tell you this the spit bag thing, it's standard procedure. Why is putting a plastic bag over somebody's head standard procedure? Why is it standard procedure to restrict somebody's breathing that is not hurting you? Who is already on the ground? Who is restrained? Whose brother called you guys to help him? You were called to help him. Yet instead of putting him in a squad car, giving him a blanket, anything like that, they put a bag over his head. Not only do they put a bag over his head, there's photo and video of them leaning full weight, pushing full weight this bag on this man until within 10 minutes, he is brain dead. He then dies a week later in the hospital. Official cause of death, asphyxiation. This is the official cause of death. There's no questioning it. He died from being asphyxiated by the police. And the response to this is to cover it up. This happened in March. We learned about this week, September, 6 months later. You know who didn't find out about this 6 months ago, though? I mean, 6 months later? You know who did out about it 6 months ago? Our police chief, LaRon Singletary. He knew. He had to. A report was drawn up and decided that they acted within their legal rights and what they were supposed to do. So he knew, and he didn't say anything for 6 months. You know who else knew? And I don't care that she would claim that she did not know. She knew. Mayor Lovely Warren. And see, I said it before earlier in the stream, and I'll say it again. Skin folk ain't kinfolk. Just because you are black does not mean you have the best interest of your community at heart. And those two are walking poster children for that. LaRon Singletary is a policeman before he is anything else. Lovely Warren is a politician before she is anything else. And anything else includes an African American. Because if they were for the community in the way that they claim to be for the community and not for their positions, they would have let their community know that this happened off rip. Immediately. Lovely Warren takes it upon herself this week to say, I am going to call for the immediate suspension. It's not an immediate suspension. It's a 6 months later suspension. But she's going to say that she's going to call for the immediate suspension of the seven officers involved in the death of Daniel Prude. One man, 7 officers. One man, 7 officers. And her quote when she says this is, oh, the police union of Rochester is not going to be happy with me. And that is fine. As if she's taken some sort of stance. If that's how you felt, if you felt like the police union of Rochester was not going to be happy with you, but you needed to do something as the leader, as the elected leader, you would have taken that stance 6 months ago. You would not have allowed this to go down in the manner that it was. If you were really for the people, the way that you claim you were for the people, if you are really doing something that you don't care how the police union reacts, you would have let us know. You wouldn't have let that man die like that. You wouldn't have had that man's brother regretting the fact that he called somebody for help for 6 months without justice being served. They continue to be on the force, continue to make arrests, continue to... I'm not there every day with them, so I'm not going to say that they're harassing or doing anything to people, but they continue to be police officers. And we're going to take that with a grain of salt and say, and that's for whatever it is. And that's for whatever it is. And she's going to pretend to take that stand. This has hit home. Figuratively and literally. And this is where I decided that I had to say something tonight. And this is not normal for me. But I've been feeling these things as I've been watching across the country. Daniel Prude's case is not uncommon. Daniel Prude's death happened before George Floyd. And LaRon Singletary, our police chief, and our Rochester mayor, Lovely Warren, when all of the things were happening in the unrest in our country about George Floyd's situation, they went onto platforms, podiums, and claimed that Rochester, New York does not have these sorts of issues. Knowing good and well that a man called to help his brother, called for help for his brother, and his brother ended up dead. And they got the nerve to get to our people and say that we don't have these problems. Well, then what problems do we have? What is our problem, Lovely Warren? What is our problem, LaRon Singletary? I want to know. What sort of problems do we have? What makes this situation different from the George Floyd situation? How can you claim to be saddened and offended by the situation that you saw there, but then keep this situation under wraps? And look, I'm going to go ahead and eventually move a little past this and talk about some stuff that has gone down around the country. I've done a lot of research, but I am also open to vetted and unbiased new info. So if I do say anything that you happen to have any sort of issue with, please, by all means, go into the chat and let me know how you feel. But with that being said, this is ridiculous, uncalled for, unlawful, unconstitutional, and downright scary. And downright scary. Right now, there are protests happening in Rochester, New York at 6:30 p.m. tonight. Free the People Rochester organized a protest on my street on Jefferson Avenue. I guess the street that I grew up on. I wanted to go. I did. But talking to my mother, she let me know how she felt about how so many other mothers feel. It's dangerous out there. They don't care about you. They just don't want the videos out there. They don't want the unrest. So they will do whatever they have to do to make you quiet. And my mother told me that she'd rather I not be out there putting my life out there on the line and things like that. And I was distraught for a minute because I go ahead and I have friends who were on the front lines last night. White friends on the front lines last night getting hit with pepper balls and spray and having to shield their eyes from being shot out and having to strip down from their burning wet clothes inside of their vehicle so that their skin does not continue to burn. And my mother asked me not to be there. She didn't want that from me. And this is the compromise that we came up with. I was going to air my grievances here on Twitch and not be out there on the front line. Do this first and see how I feel afterwards. So here we are. So here we are. And it's not just, I guess, it's not just when I say we as a country. Because as mentioned earlier, the protests are all over. I mean, Portland Let's start with Portland. Portland is protest central, and Portland is the protest star child right now, I guess. The one getting the most attention and the one that the people can't believe. And I'm gonna be honest, I really can't believe it myself. If anybody knows about the history of Oregon, they know that it is not exactly a state that treated its minorities and people of color well. They have a terrible record on race relations, no matter how progressive the people are here, it would seem. I have a quote here from an article that I was reading earlier. It says Oregon, maybe more than any other state in the North, for nearly 2 centuries was racist. When the state entered the Union in 1859, for example, 1859, Oregon explicitly forbade black people from living in its borders. Black people could not live in Oregon in any way, shape, or form anywhere. And it was the only state to do so. The only state to do so. Hey, what's up, Go? I appreciate you coming through for this real discussion. You know, if you got any opinions or anything, please feel free to share them in chat. Appreciate you being here, my guy. I do. But as I was saying, Oregon was the only state to explicitly forbid black people from living within its borders. And now we see a situation where the people of Oregon are fighting just about harder than anybody in their streets for black lives, for human rights. And that brings me to an issue that I think this country has as a whole, but Oregon is a perfect example of this. See, the people are progressive, but because they were not, but because black folk were not allowed to live within the borders starting at 1859 and going on to who even knows when. I would have to do the research on that. If anybody knows, let me know. The government and the infrastructure is the furthest thing from progressive. You see? You see how that works? And that's the case with this country as a whole. The people, a lot of people, black, white, Spanish, Asian, a lot of people are tired of it. They are. They really are. But the people being tired of it doesn't cause the change until they force the government to change it. Because the government isn't tired of it. They're the ones making the rules and benefiting from the rules. And there are people who are very comfortable within Oregon and the rest of the country who don't listen to the people of color and other people within their own diaspora asking, begging, and demanding that everybody be treated equally, because we are down here, equal is here, we are down here, and they are up here. Equity means they come down and we come up to where we're at an even spot. And that is not what is wanted in just about anywhere in the country, it seems like, from what we're seeing. So when you see in Oregon, you look at videos of protests and you see the wall of moms linked at the arms in front of the protesters, middle-aged women who have children, black, white, all of all races and creeds, who do not want their children treated in this manner, who would not want to see. Yes, William Kidd, you are right. He says the majority of people in Washington or politics as a whole grew up with segregation, and it just feels like they think that's how life still should be. Exactly. And So that's why you see situations like the wall of moms linked at the arms, insisting that you can't treat their children or anybody's children like that. When the wall of moms went out, the response to the wall of moms was the same as the response to any protesters: tear gas, violence, oppression, no understanding. And so the next night, we see the emergence of the wall of dads in Oregon, in Portland. And the wall of dads shows up, and they show up and get this was funny to me. They showed up with leaf blowers. If that's not the most dad shit that I've ever heard, you show up with to the protest with leaf blowers, because when they threw tear gas at these protesters, the wall of dads activated their leaf blowers and blew the tear gas back. They blew it back to the cops. And what's the response to that? More violence. This, that, and the third. And that's when, and excuse me if my timeline is wrong. My timeline on this may be wrong. But there's a veteran, a Navy veteran, who attended a protest. He, I want to get his name. Bear with me. Because I want to give him his flowers. He definitely deserves it. Oh man. Uh okay, bear with me. Christopher David, a Navy veteran, Christopher David. For protests, he decided to put on all of his Navy gear, like not uniform or anything, because has been retired and out of the service for a while. He decided to put on his Navy gear, Navy hat, just Navy, sweatshirts, letting them know we are also, I've served. He goes to the federal agents that have been deployed, and I haven't even talked about the federal agents deployed in Portland yet. That's words from itself. But this Navy veteran goes to the federal agents to talk to them, to reach out to them, veteran to active service member, and he just to ask them, "Hey, are you aware that you took an oath to protect? Are you aware that these are American citizens that you're violating the rights of?" And their response was to beat this man. And his response was to stand there and take it and make a statement. They broke his hand and beat him with all sorts of batons as viciously as they could. He walked away and flipped them the double birds. Flipped them the double birds. Let him know how he felt. Because he did the thing that these federal agents should be doing. He wanted to go talk. He wanted to have a dialogue. He wanted to find out, let me listen to you, you listen to me, and let's come to an agreement. And that was not what they wanted to. So the next night, I'm bringing this back to the wall of dads and the wall of moms. We see a new wall, an organized wall, a wall of veterans. These veterans saw Christopher David's rights being violated, along with the rights of people that look like me and people that look like other people. He saw them getting violated. And he put out an APB. Any veterans that felt as though the oath was being violated needed to be out there on the streets protesting and letting these federal agents know that there are trained individuals who stand against you, who fight for what's right. People showed up, veterans showed up in wheelchairs. Veterans showed up in uniform, in dress blues. Veterans showed up with pictures with insignias emblazoned over their shirts and across their hats. And they stood in front of the wall of moms. They insisted that they stand in front of the wall of moms. They insisted that they walk in the front. Now, why would they do that? And you are right. Hey, that's my brother in the chat. I appreciate you coming through. You are right. People of power and authority, listen. Why would they do that? The reason that they went out into the front is because the oath does not end. It does not. My uncle served in the military. The oath does, at rest his soul, RIP, but I gotta say it. The oath does not end. Those veterans knew that it remained, whether they were in a wheelchair or not, able to walk, able to defend themselves, if they were in the shape that they used to be, they knew that the oath that they took said that they needed to protect citizens who were, especially from all threats, foreign and domestic. While there are other federal agents being a domestic threat, federal agents that for some time, nobody knew who these people were. Federal agents that stood outside of, they were not in any sort of uniform. They had no identification of who they were, what agency they were, throwing people into unmarked cars. If that's not a domestic threat, I don't know what a domestic threat is. If where do we draw the line between militia throwing people into vehicles in unmarked cars and unmarked federal agents? We don't know that they're not the same thing. And if these unmarked federal agents were actually federal agents, the thought process is not there. That doesn't seem like a domestic threat. I'm at a loss for words. So we have other veterans taking up the cause, standing in front of the line. So many people in the most the most historically racist state in the country. So many people insisting that people shouldn't be treated that way. And government officials working to silence them. You have senators calling for troops marching in our street. Senators like Tom Cotton calling for military intervention in an op-ed published in the New York Times. Is this the sort of military intervention that he wants? Is this the way that it should look? I can't believe that. I can't believe that's the case. And look, here's where the conversation is going to get really divisive. And I am open to discussion. Again, as I said, I am open to unbiased new info, vetted and unbiased new info. So if there is new info that you want to give out in regards to any of these situations that I'm about to speak in regards to, please, by all means, let me know. But again, as I am about to talk about our president, I request that anybody that is in the chat and wants to speaks to me directly and nobody in chat itself. Soon after all of these situations, timeline. The timeline of these last few months has been so fucky with me because it's all so weird. We have major protests in Washington D.C., our our no, I was gonna say our state's capital. That's Albany. Our uh, our country's capital, the place where our president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, sits and tweets. Tweets a lot. Uh, the place where he, I guess, talk shit about our veterans. I guess he does that a lot. Um, our troops. Uh, and yes, I'm sure the president is very busy doing all sorts of things. I'm no expert. I don't have the agenda of his day or his breakdown. But the protests in DC were very telling because that is a district, not necessarily a state. And therefore there's no governor needed to give permission for occupation and things of that nature. So after the death of George Floyd, we see protesters take to the streets of DC. As a matter of fact, down like the street closest to DC, Pennsylvania, I'm pretty sure, was it Pennsylvania that has the giant Black Lives Matter mural painted on it? It was painted with Black Lives Matter. I'll have to get the exact street. I thought it was Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure. These protesters, they took it directly to the White House. They stood in front of the White House demanding, asking, pleading for justice, demanding, asking, pleading for our president to do the right thing and demand for demand justice himself. Call for the arrest of officers involved in situations, whether it be Brianna or Ahmaud Arbery or it's just George Floyd. There's too many. There's too many. It's so frustrating that there's so goddamn many. But they're asking for this justice. And his response is for the White House, for the first time I've ever seen the White House do this, to go lights out. There were no lights in front of the White House. He turned his lights off like you do when you don't want any more trick-or-treaters to come to your house for candy. He turned off the lights, closed the blind, and peeked outside to see what's going on out there. As a matter of fact, he was so threatened after some time that he fled to a bunker. A bunker that George W. Bush insisted that his people let him out of so that he can be the beacon of hope that his people needed after 9/11. He insisted that he not be in that bunker when the country is under threat of terrorist attack by outside forces. George W. Bush demanded that his people let him out of that damn bunker so that he can be what his people needed, so that he can be a leader. Trump fled to the bunker. It's reported that he fled to the bunker. He denies that he fled to the bunker. But he denies a lot of things that are objective fact. Things that can be fact checked. So do a lot of politicians. It's not only Donald Trump. But my man's got a history. I'm going to just say that. And during those nights of those protests, more federal agents everywhere. Helicopters flying low, doing the type of passes that you do in war zones. You fly that low to disperse crowds in war zones. That's a military tactic. Used on the streets of Washington, D.C. against American people asking for human rights in the United States of America, in the so called greatest country in the world. I grew up believing that. I grew up believing that we are the greatest country in the world. I grew up thinking to myself, I am so happy that as a black man, I was born in the United States of America in New York, in such a liberal haven. And these are the tactics that are being used against our people on our streets. There's a specific example that I want to talk about here in that DC protest. The example I'm speaking of, and the person that I'm going to be speaking of, is an Indian medical professional named Rahul Dubey. Rahul Dubey is a hero. And here's why. A group of 60 protesters were informed of a curfew and then pushed up on before the curfew's time. Before the curfew. They were pushed up on by police and authorities beforehand. They were funneled into a street, at which point police blocked off both sides of this street. And this is eventually, it was sometime when they were funneled into the street. The police blocked both sides of this street and proceed to attempt to arrest everybody. Because that's what Trump wants. That's what Trump, and you know, not only Trump, other Trump, not Trump, just Trump. Government officials in DC, that's what they wanted. Everybody arrested that was speaking up. So they get to throwing tear gas and all sorts of stuff, and it's chaos. Rahul Dubey is a homeowner in Washington, D.C. And he sees this going on. And his response is to throw his door open and yell to the 60 plus protesters. Note, we are in a post-COVID world. He is a medical professional, so he is well aware of that. His response is to allow 60 plus protesters to take safe haven inside of his home. Understand me. 60 plus protesters, 60 plus people, varying ages, creeds, colors, 60 plus people. He allowed them inside his home. And do you know what the police did? Instead of saying that the curfew was met, they're inside of a house. We insisted they be inside of a house after curfew and this, that, and the third. They proceed to use siege tactics. Rahul Dubey has gone on record to say that he was accosted. As the 60 plus people were going into his house, after he had let them in, he was accosted by the police outside of his door, literally grabbed, and only let go when he insisted that he is outside of his home and asked them, "What are you going to do?" And when one of the protesters asked Rahul, they said, "Rahul, why do you think that they just let you go? Because they weren't planning on letting us go." Rahul looked the camera in the face and said, "Because I am not black." This is a 40-something Indian medical professional who has seen enough of this country to know what is going on in that sort of situation. As protesters were pouring to his home, tear gas was shot into his window. Shot into his window of his home. Tear gas was shot into a man's home for harboring protesters, for harboring fugitives who were just trying to live. Where have I heard that before? Where have I heard authorities raiding homes to take people who just want to live peacefully, to take them and lock them up for voicing their opinions and being different? Where does that sounds very familiar. And look, if you can't put together what I'm putting together here, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to use the inflammatory language, but anybody that's listening to me that knows history should know what that sounds like. Throughout the night, Rahul provides milk for these people's burning. I'm sorry, Rahul and his neighbors work together to provide milk for these protesters' burning eyes. Rahul orders food. He orders food for 60 plus people strangers who he allowed inside of his home. He orders food for 60 plus strangers. You know what the police's response to this is? To literally try to use siege tactics and block the food from being arrived. That's medieval siege tactics. You post up outside the enemy's castle and you stop their food supplies. That's siege tactics used on American soil against American citizens by people in power. And only when they are told that that is wrong and they can't do that and that the world is watching and the media starts to show up, because they still at this point respected media. I'm seeing less and less of that these days. The media starts to show up with their cameras because they're starting to hear the situations, because the people inside are tweeting about this. I'm sorry. It's just the song. I love the song. It's a good song. But those are siege tactics. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. I can't imagine that they would do that. When the cameras show up, then they're like, all right, we can let the food in, let the food get there, this, that, and the third. Throughout the night, these cops attempt to agitate the protesters into leaving. And they arrest anybody who does leave. Anybody that tries to sneak out the back door or anything like that, they are instantly grabbed and arrested. And they try to agitate. They randomly knock on the doors of plainclothes people knocking on the door claiming, "We're protesters. Let us in. Open the door." And Rahul goes to the door and he goes, "I literally know that any protesters that are outside of this house, they're literally arresting and have already arrested." Rahul insists on not opening the door. He won't for that. They knock on the door. This was the kicker here. This was the kicker for me. A policeman knocks on the door and has the nerve to ask for a slice of pizza. You can look this up. This happened. He had the nerve to ask for a slice of pizza. What? Where they do that at? Where do they do that at? Trying to get these protesters to react and give them reason to do what they want to do, justifiably. And this whole time there are cameras out there. The curfew ends at 6 a.m. The people inside are questioning, are we going to be able to leave at 6 a.m. peacefully? They're waiting for the sun to come up. They're asking people to be there with rides so that they don't have to be alone when they come out. People are volunteering for rides to be there when they come out at 6 in the morning. The media is there. People are live streaming this, watching the police, watching the people inside. I, at this time, said I was going to go to bed that night. And I caught a whiff of this and I didn't go to sleep that whole night. I stayed up until 6 a.m. until I could see what was happening with these protesters and what were they going to be met with when that door opened outside at 6 a.m. And I watched this live stream and 6 a.m. hit. About 10 minutes passed, 15 minutes. Cars had pulled up, crowd had gathered. The police, the presence was lighter. They had started to leave after a while. And the door opens, and the first person to walk out, the person that put himself in danger, can you guess who? Rahul Dubey, the 40-something Indian American medical professional, took it upon himself to go out and see if everything was safe for these 60 plus people to leave. And when he walked out, he was rightfully met with cheers and applaud. And do you know what he chose to say? What words he spoke when he came out to cheers and applaud? Black Lives Matter. 40 something years old Indian American medical professional, definitely outside of outside of the tax bracket of what people think of when they think Black America per se. The first words out his mouth, Black Lives Matter. Everybody gets home as they should. Rahul is hailed as a hero. He gets his 15 minutes of fame as he rightfully deserved. He does all of these interviews and this, that, and the third with all of these news organizations, and I thought that was the end of it. I hadn't looked up Rahul's name until earlier today. Until I go into his Twitter and I find out that soon after this, he was frequently harassed by the police. Sent letters talking about complaints that he had never filed. Being followed by police escorts that he never asked for as he's trying to walk down the street. He was brave enough to be an ally on video, on camera, and do more than a lot of people. And the thanks that the people provided him, they gave him his flowers. The thanks that the authorities gave him was to let him know that he's being watched. Bet. Like my boy Goat says, America. Bet. Bet. So now, I guess this is naturally where I go to Kenosha. The shooting of Jacob Blake. 7 bullets in his back as he attempts to get into his car. And the narrative that is pushed is that they found a knife in his car afterwards. He had a knife. Let's not mention that just about everybody I know walks around with a knife on them to protect themselves in some way, shape, or form, white or black. He had a knife in his car. So 7 bullets in his back. From an officer that never tried to properly restrain him. Never tried to properly restrain him. Shot 7 times in the back. And they say that on social media, he had a knife. So it was okay. They dig into his background. They say, oh man, he had some sort of former charge of sexual assault or whatever. Or some sort of warrant or something out. So, 7 times in the back, he deserved to die. George Floyd, they looked into his past. They said what was he, what did it, he said, they said he turned over a counterfeit $20 bill. So I guess that means he deserved to die. They said that he was a convicted criminal, that he used to be a criminal, this, that, and the third. So I guess they, our rehabilitation system is not meant for that, and he was just supposed to die. I mean, we can go years back. Eric Garner, he was selling illegal cigarettes, so I guess he was supposed to die. Big Bad Bombas, it wasn't even counterfeit in the end. You have no idea how much that just hurt me. Thank you for letting me know that, but you have no idea how much that just hurt me. So I guess he deserved to die. Eric Garner. The Breonna Taylor incident. They were looking for supposedly one of her exes who was a drug runner or a gun runner or something. Went in guns blazing. I guess that was just standard procedure. And after all of this happens, they try to get her ex-boyfriend to incriminate her in his case, in a case she had nothing to do with, to try to defame her character and make it seem like she deserved what she got sleeping in her house. They use character defamation as a scapegoat for every one of these situations, as if they are perfect, as if they've never made a mistake, as if the point of our justice system, the overall point, wasn't supposed to be to rehabilitate these people who do a crime and serve their time. These things happen, and they search deep. They search so deep, even to the point where they can't find stuff, they try to make stuff up. Counterfeit bills that don't exist. Drugs and guns and money that you never found in Breonna's home. Trying to blame her boyfriend, who is a registered gun owner, for firing a weapon when police burst in unannounced to his home. All these Second Amendment gun nuts, all these NRA people, they go dead silent when something like that happens to a black man. When Philando Castile has a registered gun and he tells the police officer that he has a registered gun, and the police officer asked him to provide his ID, so he reaches for his ID and they get afraid and they shoot him in front of his wife and kids. They try to invalidate these people's humanity. That's what it is. At the end of the day, they attempt to invalidate these people's humanity to justify the treatment that they give them. But then we get a situation like Kenosha, Washington, where an out-of-state agitator, that's the word of the week, that every word of the year, I guess that a lot of people, no, COVID's the word of the year. That, I guess that's the word of the GOP, agitator. An out-of-state agitator decides that it is his duty to protect property that he has never in any way, shape, or form came even close to owning, to having any sort of personal relationship with. He goes on Facebook, he joins a well-organized militia, is the quote that they said, grabs a rifle. He can't drive yet, so he asks his mom, yeah, mom, Mom! Mom! Will you take me to Kenosha, Washington so I can shoot somebody? And his mom, I'm imagining she asked him, did he do his homework? And he lies, of course. He probably didn't do his homework. So they get into the car. And you're right, Will. Only 17, illegal to own that firearm. They get into that car. They go down to Kenosha, Washington, and 2 to 3 people end up dead. I'm not sure of the exact number, but one person ending up dead is more than enough. More than enough. He shouldn't have been there, but everybody wants to claim that it's self-defense. And yes, they were chasing him. They were chasing him, yes, and he did fall to the ground. Those people were doing the thing that a police officer was supposed to do. They were acting in lieu of an actual trained officer because the actual trained officers saw Kyle Rittenhouse with a weapon earlier in the night, told them that they appreciated him, told them that they would funnel protesters to them and leave, and then provided them with water. So normal citizens take it upon themselves to try to do the job that the police are supposed to do to stop this man from hurting. Oh, well, I said man, this child from hurting anybody else, and they die. They get killed for it. They get killed for it. There are people that are not here with their families today because they tried to defend people who were standing up for human rights from some child that shouldn't be in state, that shouldn't have a firearm, trying to defend them from him. And what do we see in the next few days in the news? Oh, Kyle Rittenhouse is a good kid. Kyle Rittenhouse beforehand, he was scrubbing away graffiti in Kenosha, Washington. The militia that Kyle Rittenhouse was a part of, they're well organized. They're he is this sort of student and that sort of student. But Trayvon was a thug for wearing a hoodie at 17. They let Kyle Rittenhouse walk right by them with a rifle. He wasn't arrested in Kenosha. He was arrested on his way back home. The police let him walk right by. But Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old, a 12-year-old boy with a toy gun sold in stores. Sold in stores. They fill him with lead. He's not with his parents right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, people. My fault. I'm sorry. Exactly. Why was he not met with the same intent? We all know the answer, but it's 2020 and we shouldn't have to ask that question. We shouldn't. But he gets filled with lead. And you know, we all used to watch movies and things like that when we were younger, right? Action movies and cartoons and all of these things. And they would use weapons and this, that, and the third, and guns and this, that, and the third, and kids like to play cops and robbers. They sell Nerf guns in stores so that you can have these fights. And my mom used to tell me all the time, you're not allowed to play with those. Not even a water gun. And I used to think to my mom, that's ridiculous. The neighbors next door, they're running around blasting each other with water guns, having mad fun. They're enjoying themselves, but I couldn't have one. And I didn't understand why I couldn't have one. Now I understand why I couldn't have one. Because of issues like Tamir Rice. I understand why I, as a black child, was not allowed to run around with a toy gun. Because my mom had the wherewithal to know how that would be viewed. And I thank her for that. I can't thank my mom enough for that. But I also I don't feel as though that should be necessary. A 12-year-old with a toy gun is not a threat whatsoever. But when you lack basic empathy for other people, not just people like you, not just people who wear the same uniform as you, or who vote for the same party as you, or who are from the same place as you, or who have the same skin tone as you, when you care about other people, that empathy should tell you that that's not cool. Empathy, basic empathy says we should have more Rahul Duvets. That's what basic empathy should tell you. But that's not what we get. Basic empathy is above and beyond some of these people. And I can't understand it. And I can't understand it. So I talk about a request that my mother made when I was younger where I am not to be running around with toy guns. And I think to a conversation that I had with my mother this very morning where I'm telling her of my plans to protest and things of that nature, and she says, "Jay, don't go down there." And I say, "Mom, there's people down there." There's a quote that says that from he was at the pro. I don't know if it's a quote from somebody else, but he was at the protest last night in Rochester on a megaphone, and the words he spoke touched me. It is our duty to fight for our people. Beyond that, it is our duty to win. It is our duty of every empathizing, red-blooded American who doesn't care about skin tone and political affiliation and things of that nature to take a stand and be against this and let people know that this ain't how it's gonna go down. But my mother, she said to me, "Please don't go down there for me. Please don't." And I I fought her on it. I fought her on it because it's one of those things where I got a niece. I got a niece, a young niece. She just had a birthday, so excuse me, her age escapes me. I have a nephew who is 16, a 16-year-old black kid that looks like a man, and I worry about it every single day. And my niece, as young as she is, she just started her own little lip gloss business. She got a bright future ahead of her. She's trying to be an entrepreneur at a young age. 11. Yes, 11. Thank you. My nephew, he got football dreams. He got himself a job at Walmart at 16, is saving himself up for a car, has hired a personal trainer, has told me that he has plans to go to this college and that college, and if that don't work out, this, that, and the third. He got a plan for his future. But my mother asked me not to go out and fight for their future because she's afraid of what could happen to me. But I'm afraid for what my nephew's future looks like. My niece and my nephew's future looks like. I'm afraid for what my future children's future looks like. And if and I had to explain to my mom, if every son listened to their mother and avoided the front lines of these conflicts back in the 60s, we wouldn't have what we have now. We wouldn't have any sort of platform to fight this. If John Lewis at 23 years old wasn't at the March on Washington making speeches, that was somebody's son younger than I am. And he was there getting into good trouble. Getting into good trouble. And my mother asked me not to go, and I had to think about it because she was so serious about it. She asked me to get onto my platform that I have here on Twitch and get everything off of my chest before I go out there and I protest on the streets and everything like that. And I can respect that. I understand why. I 100% do. But it's not always possible. And I'm not going to allow my and it's crazy. I don't want to keep allowing my friends to go out there in regards to these things and wake up the next morning and I go on Facebook and I see pictures of where pepper balls hit them because they were out there defending me when my mom asked me not to. They were out there defending me getting shot up, telling people that my life matters. And I'm not supposed to be out there too? It's here. It's here. I live in Rochester, New York. I'm looking at the news stories. I didn't think it could get here. It's here. It was here longer than any of us were ever aware. Because it was covered up by the people that we voted for and put in charge. And we're not supposed to say nothing. I'm not supposed to be out there. And I get it. I get why she doesn't want me out there. I do. I really do. I respect her wishes. That's why I went ahead on this platform and said it. But it's hard. It's hard when you see these things. It really is. I mean, I've been going for about an hour and a half now, right? And I guess the last thought I want to say is that, and this is going back to the thing I talked about a bit. These things happen to these people and then they scapegoat them. They say that they did this wrong and they say that they did that wrong. And because of that, they deserved it. It was all right that they got the treatment that they got. If that's the case, I implore anybody that's still listening, look up Elijah McClain, please. Do some research into Breonna Taylor, please. If you want to demonize everybody else and you can't have any empathy for anybody that has ever committed a crime in their lifetime and being mean to somebody else, do not ignore Elijah McClain's case. Do not ignore Breonna Taylor's case. Do not ignore Ahmaud Arbery's case. Yeah, I know he wasn't murdered by the police, but he was murdered nonetheless, and they tried to say that he was looking inside of a construction building and got what he needed. Do not ignore them. Please. Fight for your rights. Fight for your brother and sister's rights. And when I say your brothers and sisters, I don't say that as a familial tie. I don't say that as a racial tie. As humans, fight for your brothers and sisters' rights because they, they if you say nothing when they take it from some people, what happens when they move on to you and yours and your loved ones? Don't allow it. Be loud. Speak out against this on whatever platform that you have. Whether you're white, black, talk to your children. Let them know the type of world that we live in, and that yes, it's a lot of pressure, but it's going to be up to their generation to stop it. Yolanda Renee King is 14 years old, speaking at the March on Washington on issues of race relations in the United States of America. The children are not exempt. Please educate, because it's the only way that we're going to get past this. Really. Care for each other and vote. And vote. I know a lot of people are saying it now. It's more important than it has ever been in the history of my life. Vote. Not just not just for the president. Vote in the midterm elections for Congress. Vote on your local elections so that people like Lovely Warren don't get in charge and decide that she is a politician before she's a person, before she's a black person. Oh, by the way, I guess it should be mentioned, Lovely Warren is under investigation for financial misuse of her funds. Also, anybody in the Rochester area, please DM Big Bad Bombas. He is beautiful at working with his hands. He is making safety equipment for people. He just said in the chat. Just just know it's up to us to act. Please. Just know that it's up to us to act. Um it's been about an hour and a half I've been speaking on this stuff. I guess I'm gonna end this last little part in the stream with a bit of a channel update. I haven't been streaming on this platform because I have a pupper who decided where's it at? To make mincemeat. That's not a plug. The equipment is free for protesting. Free equipment. I have a pupper who decided to make mincemeat of my Ethernet cable. So streaming games, it can get choppy, especially depending on what I stream as far as my games go. I am still making YouTube videos. I got a new microphone cable, Zach, so you don't got to worry about providing me one. I got a new one quick. It's just that my Ethernet cable came back. I ordered, I guess, the wrong length. I thought I had the length, so I got to get another one. But I will be back on this. I'm uploading to my YouTube regularly if that's something that you want to see. And this will be uploaded in its entirety to YouTube. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to upload it to Facebook or whatever. So, if you're watching this afterwards, just again, heed the words that I said, man. We're coming up on it. It's closer than it's ever been. And just I'm tired of it, guys, and I hope you guys are too. I really hope you guys are too. And I hope we take steps to put an end to it. And that's really all I got to say, guys. That's going to be it for me. I thank everybody that came to this discussion tonight, and that was here, that was listening. Even if you didn't go ahead and participate in chat, the people that did, I appreciate you. Big shout out to William the Kid for being here in the chat and talking and voicing his opinions and everything like that. That's a beautiful thing. Um, you know, uh, I don't want to blow my man's spot, but he's Caucasian, and he out here listening, and that's part of what we asked for. So I appreciate that. I appreciate him. You know. And I cannot stress this enough. 12. We skipped 12 when we 11, 13. That's it. That's it. That's it. Oh, oh man, Bombas with the resub. I appreciate you, man. You big supporters, guys. You guys have been wonderful. You guys be safe. Have a wonderful night. Again, be safe. That's what I want to end this on. Be safe, guys. Love you all. EMP out.